So, Dr. Rob, I'm putting the first question in the answered so that you can see it as well. So, the first question is, I discovered my husband's sex addiction 8 months ago. He did a disclosure to me then. I'm assuming that just means he told you stuff. I found 1 month ago he lied in his disclosure to me, so I requested a therapeutic disclosure. That's good. He agreed. We are in the process of preparation for the disclosure with both of our therapists, but he made clear he does not want to talk about anything prior to our relationship because it is not my business. He told me before he did something in a previous marriage, but only massage place, maybe sex worker, but I feel like there are a lot of secrets before our relationship. I do feel it is important to know how he was so I can have a full picture of him. After I discovered his sex addiction, I felt I do not know this person anymore. Do I have the right to ask questions about his previous relationship or behaviors? That's a great question. Thanks for asking it.
Yeah, I actually have pretty strong feelings about this, and this is how I want to frame it for you. Um, how fair would it be if someone wanted to marry you, but they didn't want to tell you anything about, I don't know, that they have some major issue? How would you feel? I mean, one of the main things that when you have a marital counselor and you're putting a couple together and you're saying, not a marital counselor, what do they call that, Tammy, when you get counseling before you get married?
Oh,
Premarital counseling.
premarital. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are certain things about marital counseling. For example, one of the main things I want to know is, do both of these people want to have children? Because this is like a make or break. If one person does and one person doesn't, that would be an example of a make or break. To me, someone's sexual history. My dog is howling. He wants to play. To me, someone's sexual history, including what they do, where they've done it, who they've been with, is a make or break for marriage. And one of the things that I find really concerning is that some of the addicts just don't tell you who you're marrying. He could have said, look, I've done this and I've done that, and I have some issues. And, would it be okay if we get married, even though you know this? In other words, you know who you're marrying. But if I've done this and I've done that and I've done this and I don't tell you, it's probably because I'm afraid that if I tell you, you might not marry me. And to me, that's such standard addict behavior, which is, I'm going to get it the way I want it, and I will manipulate the situation so that I get what I want. So I would say that you've already been lied to, you've already been manipulated, and you've been used, because maybe you didn't want to marry someone with this history, and you didn't have the chance to make that decision. So in answer to your question, I think you have every right to know what's gone on, because it's a reflection of some of the things you may be dealing with, and it's your marriage. Is there really anything look, we all have a private life. I look at certain things online. I read certain things. I talk to friends about different things, and I don't necessarily need to tell my husband every single thing that goes on. But if it's going to affect us, then I do. It's kind of like the rule about social media. I've been asked before, should a spouse have access to every code, everything on your social media? And my answer is, not when you trust them. Because trust means that I can do what I need to do and you do what you need to do. And we have this belief that neither one of us will do something that would hurt the other. But once someone's cheated on you, once they've hurt you, once they've broken the rule of trust, all bets are off. You should have the ability to look through everything. I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse. And what this is about is that someone who's cheated on you, hurt you, lied to you is one down in the relationship. And that gives you the opportunity to say, hey, you want to get back up here? You got to do this, 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 and this. And his willingness to tell you the truth or whatever you want to know is how it begins to get back up there. So in answer to your question, I think you have every right to ask. And I'm a little annoyed with him because what did he say? It's something, first of all, he's not even, well, I will stop, but I'll just say, from what you say there, I think there's a lot you don't know about. And I think that there's a lot of things that he sort of, well, I did a few things, but he isn't really telling you what they were. And I would be concerned about that, because what's happened in the past is going to happen to you.
Well, and I agree with all that, but I also have a take on it, because like, if it only happened to you, then it can feel like this is about me. But if it happened to previous people too, that lays the responsibility where it should be on him, but it's also part of the bigger scope. If like this isn't just about me, this is him and this is his patterns, but it would be really important for his qualified therapist to have that information and see that too. Not these are two separate things. Disclosure, their formal therapeutic disclosure is not you knowing every little detail, but having the patterns of things. I would think his therapist would want to be unpacking all of that too, to see the patterns. Dr. Rob talks about this all the time. It's like, none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, and it wasn't like, oh, he's 40 years old and all of a sudden this stuff started happening. These are old wounds that happened. There was patterns of it that started, where the dissociating, the world isn't safe, I have to turn inward, whatever, is old stuff. So if he wants to be in a relationship with you, then having the transparency with you to set the safety for you to build a relationship would be a space I would hope he'd be willing to step into. So.
And I want to add one thing to what Tammy just said. If he wants to have an intimate relationship with you, people live in all kinds of, you're in that room and I'm in that room and we're raising the kids so we don't talk to each other. You get to decide what kind of relationship you want. But if you want an intimate relationship, there's no intimacy with secrets and lies, and that's non-intimate. I also want to respond, Tammy, to the question that I think this is a woman asked about, after I discovered his sex addiction, I feel I don't know this person anymore. I hear that a lot. And what I would say is, and it's very hard for a healthy person to understand this, is that we compartmentalize. And so I can live in my marriage and be there, not completely present, but I'm around, I'm there, I can act like the person you've always known, and then I can go over here and do something that is completely disconnected from that. And I'm emotionally disconnected. In fact, one of the things we do in treatment is to bring that's why we call it integrity, is in the word and name of, integrity is in the name of our treatment center, because it is about bringing all those compartmentalized pieces into one whole person. And that's who you want to be married to, a whole person, not someone who's broken into pieces. So thanks, Tammy.
Well said. Okay, so the next question: 4 weeks after discovery that my SA husband was visiting erotic massage parlors, our entire 30-year relationship, along with porn, phone sex, and not sure what else yet, I am emotionally drained, furious, grief-stricken, and ungrounded. I am going to therapy, online support groups, working overtime to educate myself both on sexual betrayal trauma, healing, as well as sex addiction. SA husband refuses to even entertain the idea of reaching out for help. I do see his shame and remorse. He is 3 weeks sober from masturbation, porn, and massage parlors. When I suggest an outside resource might be helpful for him, he said it is his problem and he needs to fix it, and that he knows how since he stopped his drug addiction, cigarette smoking, and drinking by himself.
Okay, so I think I can answer this fairly simply. It's a very complicated question, but addiction is like whack-a-mole. The little ball comes up here, you whack it down there, and it comes up here. And so you're telling me he gave up, okay, smoking, nicotine, drugs, fine, and drinking. So one popped up, the other went down. One popped up, and now he's dealing with sexual issues. But the issue is not the behaviors. Those are the top of the iceberg. You can see the drinking, you can see the sexual behavior more or less, but it's all the emotional stuff underneath that drives that until he really gets some help, you could knock down the sexual behavior, and maybe he has, and then he's going to start gambling, or then he's going to start spending, or then he's going to start spending 40 hours a day at work. So you can't just, we have a word for it, a geographic. You can't just move to another city and say, okay, now I'm fixed because I live over here. What is the saying? Wherever you go, that's where you are. And so he can move from one addiction to another, but he's still an addict. And we do also have this phrase, dry drunk. And I think that's what this sounds like. In other words, you stop the behavior, but you're still not a very nice person. And that is someone who has, the reason we have these resources, therapy, 12-step programs, is not simply to get sober. It's to find a different way of living, a more compassionate, more insightful, more integrous way of living. And he may be able to fix this problem or that problem, but he's still a jerk and he's still lying to you. And by the way, what you said about, he says he's 3 weeks sober. Well, that's what he says. I don't believe him. What criteria? He's not seeing a therapist. He's not in a support group. How is he accountable to anybody for that time he says he's sober? And how do you know he's not just lying to you again? So without there, as Tammy would say, without there being a process in place where there are professionals who know what they're doing and support groups, I don't care what he says. I would kick him out of the bedroom and then maybe think about, how am I going to be safe? And oh, by the way, please get STD tested, because you don't know where he's been or what he's done, or, and I think it's incredibly humiliating, embarrassing to think about doing that, but you got to protect your own safety, because I don't think he has.
I suspect, but I can't tell. But I think the next question tags on to that. But the thought that he fixed his own addiction on his own is such a laughable. I mean, like, no, he didn't. He just kept switching to another thing, And there's more. But I think this tags on a question. Even if he is sober, which I'd say at best abstinent, how in the world can he repair a relationship if we do not have some sort of couples therapy in conjunction with individual work? And couples.
Wait, let's do that one first.
Yeah,
go ahead, Tammy. You start.
I get this all the time, and most of the time, I love this analogy, and I wish I knew who to credit with it. But they said going to couples therapy early on is like rowing a boat with one oar. You're going to go around in a circle. You're going to show up really paddling to work on that relationship, and he's going to be sitting in the boat. And so you're going to keep going around in circles. So timing is really important on when that's useful. Also, the quality of the caliber of trained therapists that you have working with you to support each of you. I get all the time too, people that are going to their general therapist and it's not going well. And that's just sad, because more time and money is being, is going on, and nothing, it's just getting worse, really, because you're hoping that something is going to get better. So what were you going to add?
Oh, well, I agree. I mean, I think that the only thing I would add is that one of the reasons that we don't encourage couples therapy at the beginning is because it's almost like a repeat sentence for each partner. The person who's been cheated on says, "You ruined my life. You did these terrible things. I can't believe you did it. I hate you," on some version of that. And then the addict or the person who's been acting out says, "I'm sorry. Will you please forgive me?" over and over and over again. And you're not ready to forgive them. And, they are probably not being entirely honest with you, and they just want everything to get better. You want to know what's been happening. They want to. So anyway, couples therapy, when someone hasn't really worked on honesty and integrity and going through their history, I think is not only a waste of time, but I cannot tell you how many clients come into seeking integrity, and they say, and this is sad, and the consultations I do online too, and they say, and this is sad, "Well, we went to couples therapy. I thought we were making progress, but now I don't think so." And of course, you didn't make any progress, because if one of the partners is lying, you know why we go to couples therapy? To shut you up. That's why we go to couples therapy, and we lie all the way through it. So is it useful a year and a half or a year into doing a lot of work individually? Yes. Is it something I would do at the start? No. At least that's my feedback.
That's been my experience too, because I've had lots of people call me and anecdotally tell me what's worked and what hasn't. So, okay, the next one is, I realize he is in shock because his secret sex life is no longer a secret, and he is dealing with the fallout of my response and his loss of acting out in that particular fashion. Is it unrealistic to set a boundary of couples therapy or a non-negotiable boundary now? Or give a bit more time? Struggling with creating boundaries right now.
Well, this looks like the same person. So if it is the
That's
same
what I said. I
person,
think it is the same person. It's like you said, kick them out of the bedroom, like setting healthy boundaries for you. Absolutely. Get an STD
right.
test, but I don't need to do anything. I can fix it on my own is just BS. So.
And that's the boundary. It isn't, you have to go to couples therapy with me, because honestly, I don't think that's that productive in the beginning. But I want you in therapy. I want you in 12-step meetings. I want you working on this, not just telling me you got it handled. That's where the boundary is, because it's not about what he says, it's about what he does. And so he can say all day long in couples therapy, "Well, this happened to me when I was 9, and this is why it happened, and I didn't mean to." And it doesn't mean anything. What means something is, what is this person doing on a regular basis to not only get well, but to gain insight and to be compassionate toward you. And let me tell you, after, I don't know, Tammy, how long have we been working on this? I think I've been in 12-step programs for 35 years. I haven't stopped working. I haven't stopped growing. I've been doing this more than half my life. I've been getting support in those environments. I was in therapy for 20 something years. I'm not saying you're all as crazy as I am, but nonetheless, you're not going to get where you need to get to without taking that on as really, what I say to the guys in treatment is this is the most important thing in your life. And I'm not talking about saving your marriage, although that's why they always come in. The most important thing in your life is becoming a decent human being and not lying and not hiding and not living a double life and being honest. Those are the tasks that take more than just stopping. And I don't think couples therapy is the thing I wouldn't die on that hill. I think there are others that I would go for. And
Yeah,
by the way,
but
Tammy,
mhm.
I'm sorry, Tammy really is between us, but certainly Tammy has a line on most of the experts in the country. She worked in a training organization for many years. She knows who's trained and who isn't. And, we don't get kickbacks. You're always welcome to write Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. Tammy will send you a group information, send you a book information, send you stuff on therapists. I mean, that's part of what we do is provide resources. So, unless Tammy says no, go ahead and reach out.
Yeah, no, but it's just like sometimes I'm super busy. So feel free to email me is much better than calling on if you're just
Oh,
looking
yeah.
but tell me where you're located too, because it does matter. I need to know what state you're in. So, okay. Next question. I'm a betrayed spouse who's also been abused psychologically, verbally, and emotionally through our marriage. My husband had physical affairs as well as porn addiction, cyber sex, and a number of very long-term emotional affairs, to name some of the harmful activities, which occurred from beginning of our very long marriage. Tonight, he's attending week 6 out of the doghouse, has a therapist, and is in apparently another one that continued.
Into something. Well,
Okay.
I can say a few things
Yeah,
like
please.
this.
Yeah.
This is a very, how do I say this? This is someone I would want to get away from and have some real distance from, because verbal abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, multiple affairs, not just the sex, but emotional affairs. And that's just some of it. And this has gone on for your entire marriage. I mean, at a certain point, it's nice that he's taking a course, but what we do in those courses is we provide the educational information for people to understand where they are, what happened, how they got here, how to make it better. Because when you go an hour a week for therapy, you don't get all of the information, you get therapy. And so that's why we do this. But do all these courses, but you still got to work. You still got to go to 12-step meeting. It's like the courses are like a book, only it's active and you're engaging and you have homework and other people like you are there and you have an educator. But that's not, I don't get well by reading books. I get well by taking actions. So, and the other thing I'm concerned about here, Tammy, is we have a group called Out of the Doghouse, which follows the book I wrote. Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. I have to spit all that out. But so many people I work with take Out of the Doghouse or read that book first, because that is a book in many ways about how you can learn what your spouse is going through and to make amends and clean it up with them. But if you don't deal with the problem first, then what are you making an amends for? What are you showing empathy for? So really the first thing to do is to take a sex addiction 101, a course, a porn addiction 101, to start from the beginning with the problem rather than starting at the end, which is making my spouse feel better. So it's great if he's in, week 2 of Out of the Doghouse. What I'd like to see him is have done 6 weeks of sex addiction work with, those courses, but porn, all that stuff, before he learns how to, make you feel better.
Well, I think I found the second half to it because it says men's recovery group. So look at the very bottom one, men's recovery groups, one of which is led by a therapist, but it doesn't say qualified therapist. Hopefully it is. Our kids are all in their 40s and have families of their own. I don't think family secrets are good. Do you know that addiction, I know that addiction runs in families. Depends. I don't want to hurt my kids, and I'm struggling with the question, tell the kids and the addiction and or betrayal, or if so, what to tell. So
well, this is an easy question for me. Now others may disagree, but this is my experience and knowledge over 25 years or something like that. Don't tell your kids ever. No kid, whether they're
wait.
20 or 40. Well, let me answer this question.
I know, but
Why
I
should
think
I
I
not
found
tell her?
another. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because this is about sex. That's why you don't talk about it. I don't want to think about the kind of sex my father had. I don't want to think about who he was with, or I want to believe that he was faithful to my mom. And even if he wasn't, that's not something you want to tell your children. And I'll give you a couple of reasons why. Tammy and I have experienced this. We've had people come to treatment at Seeking Integrity, do a fabulous job. And then they go home, and we've been working with the spouse on getting these folks to grow and come together. And the kids start jumping in and saying, well, I don't want you with mom, and I don't want you with dad. And so they start to pull apart based on their feelings, this couple that's trying to work on things. And no matter how gently, how compassionately you tell your kids, they're going to take sides. And they're going to think about what dad did every time they pass the massage parlor. So, yes, you need to tell people. Tell everyone who is meaning to you that is safe. I wouldn't tell your brother, I wouldn't tell people you're going to see at Thanksgiving every year, because they're going to look at him, and it's not going to be a good thing. But I really believe, and I believe this strongly, you can tell your kids that dad and I are struggling, that we've been dealing with some issues, that we really are feeling distant right now. We have a lot of work to do. We've had some real problems. I mean, tell them and acknowledge, whatever the age they are, acknowledge that what they feel, that there's something not quite right, because kids always pick that up, is true. But the detail, now, the other piece is I've seen spouses tell, or I've seen the betrayed partner run and tell kids because it makes them feel better. I'm going to tell your kids what you did, and and then you see how screwed you are. And certainly coming out of an emotional place like that, what you're really saying is, I want to pull this kid on my side. I don't hear that here. But my question is, what would be a good reason to tell a 40-year-old that their father's been cheating? I mean, what benefit does that have to you, to your coupleship, to these adult children? um, I don't see the benefit. And addiction, actually, Tammy, you have some thoughts about addiction runs in family. So let me say this: there are psychological pieces like anxiety or obsessive compulsive thinking, or things like that, that absolutely run in families. And for people who go through extremely stressful childhoods, those things can become activated. And so they can become anxious people, they can become depressed people, or they can become addictive people. It isn't necessarily the case that if my father is an addict, I'm going to be an addict. But it is true, I certainly have the potential for emotional issues, because that's biological. And then if I have a very stressful upbringing that causes that causes issues that sort of roll around in my brain for the rest of my life, there's easier ways to say it. It doesn't mean I'm going to pass it on to my kids. I will say this: if these kids' father has been cheating on you for 40 years, there is going to be an emotional effect on your kids. And I think when I have men in treatment, when there are men that Seeking Integrity, this is one of the challenges with younger men, who are 30 or 35, and they have kids at home who are 5 or 6 or 3. I can work with them to restore or grow that relationship with their kids that they never had. And they can become the father and husband and friend that they weren't. Um, However, when I work with older men and they're 60 and their kids are 25 or 30, it's too late. Save for their therapy, but there's nothing you can do. These children's lives are formed, they're adults, and there's nothing you can do to really save them or help them, except have them understand there are some challenges that may have affected them. And the reason I find that difficult is some of the men, when they come to terms with what they didn't offer their kids, for the older men, it's too late. Now my kid's 28 and I can't be a really great father to him because he might be a father. But when they're younger, it's easier. So, but your kids are older and they're adults, and honestly, their lives are their lives, and you've done what you've done. Your job is over, and I wouldn't add to their. And remember, people have challenges. Your kids are older; they don't need your challenges to be dumped on them, or they got enough stuff of their own, I'm sure. So anyway, that's my thought. But Tammy, you may have a different one.
No, I don't have a, and there's a tag on the second one that says, why shouldn't my children know what I'm dealing with these issues if we are actively dealing with his addiction? I think what you shared of, like, we're really struggling. We've got some, we've got some issues that we need to address, for the two of us, love you, want to appreciate that you care,
Right.
but yeah, I had a call today from someone. Let's just say the adult child knew about dad's addiction and then was experiencing betrayal, and so the extra trauma, like it was not going well. And I thought, oh, that's because all of this, it's like the trauma of knowing about dad and dealing with, it just makes it so much worse. So if, we love our kids, we want to, I was thinking when you were talking about the 60-year-old, so you can't be the dad but you can be the grandpa. You can learn to be the
Yes.
grandpa, and you can step in, and your kid is probably going to grieve that they didn't get that version of dad. On some level, that's true of all grandparents. You get to be like you get to have the fun stuff, but so I want you to know that there's hope, but yeah, I don't think any kid, I know people go, well, my kids need to know what I'm dealing with. No, your friends, your support group needs to know. They can know that things are challenging and I'm really struggling right now, but you doing so that they wheedle it out of you. Well, they made me tell. I mean, I hear that too, and it's just, I want, you don't need to add extra trauma to your kids. They have enough of their own stuff from all the stuff that they've had to deal with. So, I guess go to a group trauma therapy together if that's, where it goes. So
I wanted to add something to this, Tammy. There is a little edge in here which is, why shouldn't my children know that I'm dealing with these issues? And I think, with all due respect, that's more about you, because I don't think your children sitting around saying, "Oh, I wish I knew more about my parents' sex life." I mean, I just don't think that's what's going on with them. The other piece I wanted to say really strongly, my poor dog, is when you do talk to children about mom and dad having problems or issues, make sure they know it isn't their fault. Especially with younger children, they really feel like, what did I do wrong, that they're arguing, or, they take it on themselves. And so I think it's really important to say to the kid, hey, you had nothing to do with this. Mom and dad love you. We appreciate you. We're not going anywhere. But adults have things that they need to deal with, and it isn't about you, and we'll always support you and love you. And that's really all the kids need to know. Tammy, you're a grandmother. You look 28. I don't
I
understand how
thank
that could be the
you.
case.
Yes, no, I have it's scary how old some of my grandkids are getting, but anyway, that's a whole nother topic. So, but I'm going to get to see some of them in March. I'm so excited. Okay. I am an addict, and whenever I am triggered by something on TV, I say I need space and go for a walk. She insists I talk immediately and is triggered about me leaving. I let her know that my sex addiction is not her problem, but she gets even more triggered. What is the solution here? Am I gaslighting here by letting her know that my sex addiction is not her problem?
Can't you go out for a walk together? She's going to be less suspicious, less worried. You can simply say to her, I feel a bit triggered. You saw that thing on the screen. Why don't we go for a walk? I kind of want to get away from this movie. In other words, does it have to be such a big deal that he goes to you and does this mea culpa, and this is what I did? And then the spouse gets more triggered. And I don't think you're gaslighting. I, I don't think you can say this is not your problem. It is her problem or his problem, because if you had cancer, it would be their problem. You have the disease, but they have to live with it, deal with it, respond to it. So it absolutely is this person's problem. Um, I guess, the only challenge here is I don't run to my spouse every time I get triggered. You would never have any peace in your relationship if every time you saw someone on the street and wanted to have sex with them, you had to tell your spouse. We have to tell our spouses when we've done something serious, and especially when we've done something sexual. They have to know, they need to know. That's the way it is. But, if you get triggered, I think that's going to create more drama than you want. And I think that's what you're finding out here. So, if she's open to it and you talk about it and you say, when I get triggered, could we go for a walk or do spend some time together, turn off the movie? Great. You've talked about it before. You have a plan. You know what you're going to do. But the other thing I would do is, I would say, I need a few minutes to call my sponsor to go to the bathroom. I just don't know that I would. It's not her job to handle it or to manage your problem. So, by the way, if you're not going to go act out during the movie, here's an idea. Why don't you tolerate the trigger? That would be a really good thing, is if you let the trigger happen and let it go by. Now, if you're watching, what we used to call, oh, Tammy, this is so far ago, X-rated movies. If you remember that, if you're watching, you shouldn't be watching movies with people running around naked or all of that stuff, anyway. But if you do get triggered, so what? So you have to sit there and be triggered and try to work through it. And if you can't, then when you're done with the movie, you go call someone. Unless you're going to start masturbating right there while you're watching the movie, or, I think part of our getting better is tolerating that we have these feelings and we're not going to act on them, and that we understand that we're going to have them and we can get through it without actually acting on it. So if you're sitting with your wife and you're watching a movie, or your husband, whatever it is, and you feel triggered, note that, finish the experience, movie, whatever. And then when you have a few minutes, call your sponsor and say, I got triggered by this. You do need to talk about it and get it off your chest, so to speak. But I don't recommend that you draw your spouse's attention to it in that moment, because I think you're just going to have an unhappy relationship if you, every time you see something you're triggered, you go to your spouse. Our spouses are not our parole officers, they're partners. And they're not, and I know the spouses don't like to hear this, but they're not the ones that we need to go through every time we get distracted. That's what the people in recovery for. That's what my therapist is for. What I need to go to you for is when I've really effed up. And I need to let you know that, because I don't want to have any real secrets from you. And I don't want to have 6 months in recovery when you thought I had a year, and then have you say, oh, you've got that year. And I'm like, well, I don't want to lie to you, but I don't need to tell you every single thing that crosses my mind. I have to tell you about things I do, not things I think about.
I think that was a really good solution. I think kind of in general too, you kind of talked about like when I'm not triggered, having a plan for things. So like, if I'm triggered, can we go for a walk together? Whatever. I think talking about it and not in the moment is really good. But I really love like tolerating, like I'm thinking, oh, I think I would do a mental gratitude list right then, because like that would shift my focus from being focused on the trigger to like, oh, I have lots of reasons to be grateful. If you've got your phone there, text your sponsor, like just checking in, whatever. I mean, there's so many different things to do. But yeah, I think it's almost like I'm triggered and I have to, like it just adds the drama to it that neither of you need. So,
Can
but
I
I
ask,
really
add one more?
appreciate you're
Go
here
ahead, Tim.
asking. No, I'm just
It's
like,
a great
I
question.
love that. Yeah, I love that you're here going like, I want to do this differently. So that's great.
And I just wanted to say one more thing. Why don't you finish the movie? Why don't you just finish the movie? Maybe by the time it's over, you won't be thinking about this anymore. Tammy, I have to let my dog out. So can you give me a minute? Because he's very unhappy. And I
Okay,
will be
then I'm
right
going to
back.
skip the next question and I will come back to that. But yes, so come
Okay,
back.
thanks.
Uh-huh.
Of course. Back.
Okay, how long does it take an addict to drop all denial? Oh, that's a great question. I maybe shouldn't have skipped this one. My SA husband is full on into recovery, a meeting a day for 6 months so far. Has a sponsor, has finished out of the doghouse 1 and now doing 2. Great. He really wants it, but his denial keeps kicking in. I am sure this is common. It is. Any input on how long it on average it takes to drop the denial and what else he can be doing to help himself. So like I wish, everybody's looking for magic timelines and there isn't any, and it really is dependent. I mean, we mentioned earlier, somebody that's been doing something for, 40 years, that's different than somebody that's been doing it for 5 years, so those patterns are ingrained. What I love is that I'm hearing him, engaging. He's working on things. A meeting a day is good. And doing out that doghouse is good. I guess I'm a little curious, he has a sponsor, so I'm assuming, but this is an assumption based on what I'm reading, he's working on the steps. I think I was talking to somebody earlier today. I talked to a lot of people today, so sorry I keep saying that, and this is a different person, but talking about steps 4 through 9 are really the meat of the program. And so I think steps 4 and 5 really help you get out of denial, because you're putting a list in step 4 of like it's everything. It's not just the terrible things you've done and all of that, but it's a searching a fearless moral inventory. We also put the stuff that where we actually have done some good things. So having that perspective really does help get out of denial. I think it's one of those too where the more he's engaging in things and learning to tell the truth. Like our clinical director at Seeking Integrity Los Angeles says, tell the truth and tell it faster. And so the more he's learning to catch himself, but I really appreciate, Scott has shared this a couple times on webinars, with, and and I'm shifting a little bit, but denial is lying, and so where Scott was like, I was lying in a meeting, I didn't, like, I'm in the safest place on the planet, and I'm still, he caught himself lying. So like, even though we're really working on towards that, it's such a shift from how we were, that it does take some time. So what I want to encourage you with is look at the things he's doing, and hopefully you're starting to feel, like you're starting to feel some pockets of safety where you go, okay, he's working on this, he's working towards becoming trustworthy. And I think you'll, I trust your gut as you start to feel safer and more settled, that he's working on getting out of denial. Unfortunately, I hate to say this too, but I know people that were sober from alcohol 20 years and go out and drink because they forgot. So like, denial is a really powerful thing. I work really hard on a daily basis at making sure that I'm very aware that I'm a person in recovery, and I want to stay a person in recovery, not an active addiction. So so it does get better. Great that he's got 6 months, but with all due respect, that still is a short period of time, probably in comparison to the many years or decades that he was living a different way. So.
And let me add to that, just about you and I, Tammy, is that you guys don't know this, but we get something out of this, which is we get the gift of being reminded of the challenge every single day. Those phone calls that Tammy had all day, there are people calling in trouble, and I don't mean to speak for her, but that's a reminder of, oh yeah, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to, or I remember when I was in that place and I don't want to go back there. It's one of the reasons people go to the meetings for their whole life, because it's like, oh, right, I'm helping this person because I know how to help them because I used to be there. And so the whole process, I think, of being reminded of the challenge is really is part of the deal. It's why they say in the 12 steps that service is important, because when you're helping someone else, you're hearing that story all over again. Tammy, I have a feeling this level 3 question was what you wanted to talk about.
Yes, I
Can you read
that one by? What is the latest research on level 3 sex addiction from Patrick Carnes or Paula Hall writes in their book? Do sex addicts progress to pedophilia or watching underage porn? There is so much shame already being a sex addict, just wondering why pedophilia was not considered a separate illness and left out of the sex addiction literature.
Okay,
now
so
you know why I skipped that one. So
no, I think you could easily answer that.
Yeah.
Pedophilia is sex offending. When you have sex with someone without their permission, and children are never old enough to give permission, or if you rape somebody, or those kinds of things are offending by nature, by definition. Definition is of offending is non-consensual sex. So this is not our area of expertise. I mean, I know a lot about offending, but I don't treat offenders. It's a whole different arena of work, and in a way, it's like, I don't know. I might work with people who do domestic violence. I'm making this up. Maybe I work with people who involve domestic violence, and they hit people and they throw plates and they have all those anger issues. But that doesn't mean I work with people who kill people. I mean, there are extremes of behavior and they don't all land in the same place. I think the reasons that those aren't emphasized, there's actually a number of reasons. Number one of the reasons is that we don't treat it, that it is a whole separate arena. Now, there are people who are offenders who have compulsive histories and do need that kind of work, but that's not the arena that Pat and Paula and I work in, for the most part. And if someone has had what we call a contact offense, they have actively touched someone inappropriately, we actually don't take them because they need a higher level of care, so to speak. And the part of it is also that so few sex addicts have crossed the line into this behavior, and I mean a very small percentage, that if Pat and Paul and I start talking about all this, then people say, oh, sex addiction, that's sex offending, right? And we already have enough problems helping people understand that we're not working with offenders for the most part, that we are working with people who have sexual issues. When people hear sex addiction, they think out of control sexual behavior. That's the person who's standing in front of my kid's school. That's not really who we are. but we also try to not give people that an impression, because it isn't. I tell you who we will treat who's an offender. If someone is an exhibitionist, they're a voyeur, they're doing things that don't involve touch, then we might, and it's part of a compulsive pattern, we might treat that person. But we don't treat people who are engaged in non-consensual contact. And there are whole arenas of therapists who do that, programs that do that. There are conferences and educational, again, it's like the difference between someone who's violent and someone who isn't, and they're going to probably be treated by different people. So I live on a whole world that is related to addiction, but there's a whole world related to offenders, and that's a world unto its own. And it's different than the one that we work in. I don't know, Tammy, you've heard this a lot. Is there anything that you would add?
Well, I just I hear often that people immediately go to he's going to graduate to that, he's not doing anything, pedophilia, his arousal template isn't even on there. And then all of a sudden he's going to, decide that that's what he wants to do. And I get the fear, and especially with people with kids or grandkids, you want to make sure that they're safe, even if they're adult children. But, it's one of those where it isn't, that's not the same. I love math, so, I say there's a Venn diagram, there's the offenders and there's the addicts. And there's this intersection in the Venn diagram where they can overlap. There can be some that have offender tendencies that are really addicts, but there's a whole bunch of people that are just offenders. And then there's a whole bunch of people that are just addicts. So yeah,
and we have enough people to treat. Just treating the addicts, I want to leave the offenders to another category in another world.
So the next question: I have always been the one managing our family finances, even though some of the things my husband did not like and wanted to do it differently, but I never agreed. So we had been managing the way I wanted the last 8 years of our marriage. Since I discovered my husband's betrayal, large scale sex addiction 1 year ago, I have kept much more control over finances, so he has very limited access to our finances. It has become a huge conflict between us. He has been trying for some time to get control over finances, and he said he does not feel safe, and he wants to have his own fund so he can feel safe. The more he wants this, the more unsafe I feel. I asked him to be patient and we focus on recovery now. We can revisit this matter when I feel safer, but he would not agree. He said, according to his 12-step work, he has to get his house in order and he does not want to wait. I feel we are at the edge of a break now. What should I do?
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Do you mind if I turn that over to you to start, Tammy? Is that okay?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know anywhere in the step work where it goes, you need to have your own, checking account and things like that. So that to me is like, I'm using something that you might not know about, or somebody said in a meeting, yeah, you should, whatever. So that I would discount. But to me, it seems like there has to be, what is, like I hear you going, not yet, and him going, now. But is there some negotiating room? Is there somewhere you sit down and you look at the finances together? Is there some space where you guys can negotiate that feels safe for both of you, that he doesn't get his own account, but that you don't have it all locked down, that there is some, if transparency is what we're looking for the addicts, I wonder if there's an opportunity for you to demonstrate that on the transparency on the financials as well. I don't know if there's, I kind of wonder if he's afraid that you're, gathering up the finances so you can get a divorce. And that may be the case, but, is there some space where you go, well, if I often use the podcast you did with Dr. Stan Tatkin. We do what's good for our relationship. And so would there be some level of transparency in the finances that would be good for the relationship for both of you, where it's not just my account, your account, but it's ours.
When I lean over, I'm taking notes. I'm not like chatting with anyone online.
I wasn't even worried.
So there's a number of things going on for me. And I'm just going to be really honest. Mm-hmm. If I was married to you, I'd be incredibly resentful. I'm 58 years old. I don't want someone controlling all my finances. And I don't want to be punished because I acted out or have this problem. They're not the same. I don't want to be punished because I hurt you, I let you down, I have these problems, but you're not in charge of my whole life. And I agree with Tammy. I think, there's an agenda here. I don't know what it is, but I don't know if it's your agenda, like trying to control it so he doesn't do this or that or divorce. I don't know if it's his agenda, but there's an agenda here, and I don't know what it is. I agree with Tammy. I don't think control is what our healing is about. I think transparency is what our healing is about. And I think it's great. There's a feeling you have under here. And what is it? Do you feel afraid? Do you feel unsafe? I think you said that. Does he know what the feelings are? Not the I'm going to do this and I'm going to control that. I don't trust you. But does he know that, why? What is it? And do you know why? I mean, what does this mean to him? What does it mean to you? And then I absolutely agree. There is no reason why you can't sit together and you say, I'm still in charge of them, but this is what's going on. Tell me, what would be different if you were in charge? What would you want? What would you like? If the agenda isn't divorce, if the agenda isn't I want to get control of this money, so whatever, then maybe he has a real reason. Maybe he wants to use it to hire sex workers. I don't know, but you don't know either. So I think the two of you really need to sit down. And I will say also that, and Tammy probably knows this too, how couples handle money is often a reflection of the relationship. I can tell you that I write all the bills, I pay all the bills, I do all the vacation planning. I do all that because I want more control than my spouse does. And he's like, oh, go ahead and do it because then he doesn't have to. So, but the control issue is absolutely a part of my relationship. And I tend to want to manage and control things. And sometimes he has to say, no, I need to be involved with that. But this doesn't feel like it's about the money. That's what I'm really saying. This is about something else. And I'm not sure what it is, but there's more on the table than is being said. This is on the surface. There's something underneath that I think you guys should be talking about and should work on talking about, because there's something going on that neither of you are either hearing or saying.
So I looked it up. Deborah Kaplan wrote a book, For Love and Money, and she did a podcast with Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction. So you can find that on the SRH, the sex and relationship healing.com site. So, but Deborah Kaplan, Kaplan, For Love and Money is the book, and it's exploring sexual and financial betrayal in relationships. And she's a CSAT trained therapist, but her take is really interesting on money. It might be a useful book for the two of you to explore. So, but not fight about. Okay. It's Valentine's Day, Dr. Rob and Tammy. Isn't it heartbreaking, truly loving, but not being able to reach the pinnacle of healthy love with a sex addict, or any addict for that matter? I do find codependence at least honors our hearts and true intentions. I think for any addict in active addiction, but honestly, I mean, I work real, and I believe Dr. Rob does too. I don't know if we reach the pinnacle of healthy love. I'd have to go talk to my husband, but honestly,
what's a pinnacle?
I know exactly. So, but honestly, I think I think we in active recovery work really hard at having integrous relationships, at being honest, at being the kind of people that other people want to see show up in their lives. So in active addiction, you're right, but I do think in active recovery, we can be different.
This is a tough one because I can remember a
there's
lot
more.
of lonely. Oh,
I'm just putting
Go
it in. So it says, you are both the pinnacle of what I, SAPA, seek to be in my recovery. You don't know us as well, so maybe
Well,
maybe you
rest
have
of
a
the
better
question.
aspiration. I have to ask: have either of you had a bumpy road? Have you ever relapsed? I can answer for me. I have not relapsed. I have I had a bumpy
Food?
road? I've had a
Food?
life. Oh my God.
Food?
Yes. Yeah. I've
Food?
been married, divorced. I was like, oh my God,
But
I've had a life.
Tammy,
Yeah.
food? I heard alcohol, but when it comes to those behaviors, it's harder.
Yeah. So food, after I actually surrendered and like, no, I mean, it's been, have I made better food choices some days than others, but I have to, I have to say that I have not returned to my bulimic behavior after, I mean, I took some work. So there was a period of time where in between where I was going like, okay, this is a problem, but I wasn't able to really quit it. But, at some point, and that's been, probably 30 years now that I have not been active in my, my problematic food behaviors.
But I'm thinking, and I don't mean to challenge you, Tammy, personally, but I've heard you say that you just said it now. Like the food wasn't just okay, I'm done. It was a bouncing around for a period of time until you were able to
Correct.
integrate. You could
Yeah.
call those slips, or I don't know what you want to call them, but there was a
Yeah.
road for us, and it isn't perfection. And I know this is the hardest thing for you spouses to hear. First of all, bumpy road. I relapsed. I had slips for about 3 years, regularly. I could tell you some funny stories, but I won't. But I was single when those things happened. But yeah, it took me years to really get it. Now I'm a little sicker than most people, but it took me years. And I don't think that you spouses, as much as you want to say it, to believe it, as much as every one of us wants to tell you it, I think we all have slips. I don't think now it may not be I'm starting an affair and maybe I looked at some porn, but we don't get this right away and we don't get it perfectly. So a bumpy road, I can only begin to tell you how bumpy the road is. I'm glad you can't see that road. And I certainly don't think if you saw Tammy and I have a good fight with each other, we're definitely not the pinnacle of recovery when we're working together all the time. But but there's more here. Is it heartbreaking? Of course it's heartbreaking. You love this person. You want them to be the person they had said they were going to be, and they're not. And Valentine's Day is what it is. And to me, it reminds me of pain rather than joy when I'm in this situation. It's like someone who passed away. When their birthday comes around, I feel sad. I feel emotionally moved. So um, I agree codependence is written for partners and spouses to really forgive themselves. And it is an honoring of what you did out of love. I will say this though, in to our addict little redemption, I think we do the best we can. Not knowing what we don't know and being the mess that we are. And I know this is going to sound, I don't know, Tammy, you can fix this for me, but he stayed. He wants to be there. He hasn't left. He hasn't gone out with one of those affair partners. He doesn't know how to love you, and he doesn't know how to make you have a happy relationship. And maybe, and I know, God knows, all of you partners want something more than someone who's just willing to stay. But sometimes that's the best that we're able to do is be around, stay with you, try to be a partner as best we can until we start to down that road of healing. And that road of healing is a long one. Spouses, I would lower your expectations of where we might end up in the beginning, but I would raise my expectations about what are you doing? Oh, this person is going to meetings 3 days a week and they're calling their sponsor. Oh, and I see them going to therapy and I never have to remind them. They don't come home and say, oh, I don't want to do that. They just do it. Those are the signs of recovery that I really want to see. I might not have sex with them for a while, but I would feel more comfortable and even more valued if I saw them doing the work that they needed to do and I didn't have to be that police officer. But I don't want to minimize, Tammy, that obviously everyone wants more than just to be stayed with. So, I mean, can you help me a little bit? Rescue me
Well,
here?
but I think, I think part of it is that we stay because it's really easy to just go, bye. Sometimes it feels like that would be the easier. And so I do honor that people do. And I had to reflect, but yeah, I think it was probably, and I don't even know, but it was probably a year-ish from the time I went, oh, this is actually a problem. Yeah, I was kind of reflecting on the person that fixed their own addictions by themselves. It took
Right.
me, it was incredibly difficult to, that was hard for me to, be willing to tell people I needed help. And this, I should have known better because like I was already in recovery, from this other stuff. So how did I mean, like the shame of like, just all the way around. So it was hard. And it wasn't without its own, bumpy roads. But then eventually, when I finally went, I have to be congruent, and all of this stuff, and temptations of early on, it was really tempting to go. I know a quick way to numb out. and I had to go, nope, I have to sit here in this emotional, not fun, but it was worth it.
And it is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking to find out that someone you love and believe in has gone off and done things to hurt you. I think that's one of the hardest things for spouses is you said you loved me and I trusted you. And when you went out in the world, went out into the world, part of being married is, you may do things right, you may do things wrong, but I don't expect that you're going to do things that you know will hurt me. And so when we go out and do something we know will hurt you and we do it anyway, all bets are off for you. You think that we're always going to have your back. I mean, that's the minimum of being in an intimate relationship, but addicts have their own back and you come later. So I do want to say, though, that I hear this all the time, and I know that Tammy does, which is, if you loved me, how could you do this? And I think we're absolutely capable, to the best of our ability, of loving you. But, I say this all the time, we are not bad people, but we are deeply broken people. And to go from broken to healthy is a road. It just doesn't happen overnight. But you can have expectations of what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and what you want from their healing to make you feel safe. But I can't take the grief, nor do I wish I could, out of your Valentine's Day. I wish I could.
But thanks for spending it with us. So
we love you.
Yeah. Seeking therapy advice. Both partners have childhood traumas, just starting to acknowledge marriage betrayal on both sides. Husband finally admits to porn, sex addiction. Wife used betrayal to end marriage. So betrayal on both sides. Reunited after 2 years, military PTSD after getting back together, family dynamics resurfacing with parental issues, aging, etc. Oh, I wonder if there's more to this. Oh yeah, there is.
Is there a
Hang on.
question?
Yeah, I'm coming. Okay, so now check.
Why is everyone doing double messages today?
I don't know.
It's funny.
It's my Valentine gift. I get to. Sorry, didn't finish the question. Where do we start individually dealing with childhood trauma, as a couple doing marital issues, overwhelmed with situations and not sure where or how to start? Thank you. I'm sorry, but gosh, I appreciate that you guys are getting back together again and you're trying to navigate, get a roadmap of where to go. So, okay.
And yeah, I appreciate that you understand it's not forgiveness, but understand that you both are broken and that his behavior comes out of brokenness and not not that he doesn't love you or doesn't care about you or doesn't want to be with you. He's just really broken. And by the way, I'm writing in Prodependence, Tammy, and this is I'm doing a revision. And one of the objections I had to the original book was, I thought we didn't have any problems. I thought we just married these people who have problems. And no, we all have issues and we are drawn to other people with issues. How we play them out and who we choose, something completely different. But this is a question about trauma. So I'm going to tell you that you cannot work on trauma until you're sober from addiction. And I'm talking about your spouse now, because you have to understand we get triggered by difficult emotions. And if I don't know how to stay sober when I'm working on trauma, guess what's going to come up? Difficult emotions. And what I don't want to happen is what I'm doing in my trauma work leads me back to the addiction. So I really need to have a solid foundation of addiction recovery. And I think partners really need a solid foundation of a place to go where they've grieved and work through some of their pain. And when there's stability, then you can work on trauma. I do think trauma work is an individual game to some degree, but I've also seen some wonderful work done with spouses and partners and couples around trauma. Overwhelmed means help is needed. And, one of the reasons I think you're probably here is to seek help and guidance. I think, though, that some of these are more specific to you and her or you and him. And I would probably call Tammy, or sorry, not call, write her an email and say, I need to find the right person to deal with this, because two things. Number one, these are very difficult. This is a very difficult multi-part question. And second of all, I would have to know what the trauma was, where it came from, how it's showing up in your relationship, where the addiction is in recovery, and all that stuff. I need a lot more information to answer this specifically for you. However, I will say that when we act out, that every time we act out, that's trauma for you, and it re-engages past trauma for you. What else was there? By the way, yeah, I really love, thank you for being here and saying, I was so angry about what happened that I just said, screw you, I'm going to sleep with someone else. I love that you were honest enough to say that to us and to say that to to your husband or wife. Um, but that is not addiction. That's what I want to say. And it isn't, you can't say, oh, well, you did this and I did that. And so, we're equal. The fact that you went and did some, what is it? There's a word for this. Angry sex, I guess is another word for it. Acting out
Revenge.
related revenge sex. Ooh, thank you, Tammy. That isn't the same as his seeing, 500 of this or 200 of that, or spending, we are in compulsive patterns of long-term problematic behavior. If you go out and have revenge sex, I don't appreciate that. And that's a problem. And maybe something you need to work on your anger, but that doesn't equate to the degree of the problem that I have as an addict. And yeah, boy, do our family dynamics are always in our lives. You can't avoid them. How many TV commercials do you see someone saying, I think I've become my mom? Um,
There's a whole
but
series of
anyway,
those. So I there's one more question that I want to
sure.
do, but with that one, like it is complicated. Do email me, but I mean, Dr. Rob does a 2-hour expert consultations, and he is really good at helping, pick out things and give guidance. So that may be something to consider too. But the last question that we're going to be able to do tonight is regarding telling the children. What if we end up separating? I, the addict, do not want my children to blame mom or think less of her for separating. Do we tell them that I was unfaithful? They range in age from 20 to 30. Thank you both for all your service.
So, how many ways can I say no? How many ways can I say, don't tell your children, don't tell your spouse to tell your children? Why would you bring your children into this situation? Whether, especially if they're young, I mean, little kids in particular, you don't want to, does a 9-year-old or 12-year-old want to know about mom's and dad's sex life? I mean, that is what you're talking about, or how you're getting along in the relationship. You don't want to know that when you're 10. You just want to know that mom and dad are there and they support you and they love you. And if they're having some challenges, you can say, well, you know how you to fight in the schoolyard with so and so? Well, sometimes mom and dad do that too. But it has to be age appropriate if you're going to talk to them about challenges. And I will say over and over and over and over again, I would never tell my children, ever. I would tell them that, and by the way, I know some of you have, and I think that over time you'll probably reap some negative consequences about that, whether it's them wanting to pull the two of you apart, or, and then their kids look at them and say, why are you so upset? And, this is how you create generational issues. You betray their childhood by bringing these adult issues into it. You separate, you don't, you stay together, you don't, they're angry at mom or they're not. Y'all can figure that out. It doesn't really matter why you're divorced or why you're separated. Your kids don't need to know that. We had problems. We weren't getting along. We decided to live somewhere else. They don't need to know anything about sex, romance, or those kinds of things. Lots of parents get divorced because mom or dad had an affair. It doesn't mean that kids ever find that piece of information out. Now, I mean, you have worked with, I'm thinking of Stephanie, for example, people who are older and who were told as young children, and you've heard it from other people. The ones that I've heard say, I wish I'd never known. But I wonder what you've
And
heard.
that's been my experience. And so many of them have very complicated relationship things. But here's the deal. The other thing is you think that they're automatically going to side with mom. You'd be amazed at how often I hear from people that blame, the kids now blame mom. So
Right.
you don't know what's going to happen. It's okay to say we had some irreconcilable differences. We're both going to be at the grandkids' birthday parties together. It's, we're going to behave as adults. It's fine. It's not about you. It's about us. We're choosing different paths. We wish each other good things, etc. But yeah, I mean, I know people who have ruined the family with telling people, and they did take sides, and then they came back together again. They found that they had reasons to stay together, and now there's this hot mess of the kids are going like, why are you doing, so it's not your kids' responsibility. It's for you two, the adults, to navigate this, to get support for yourselves, from people who can be there to support it, but it's not your kids, it's not your grandkids. So
And I don't understand. I just want to say quickly, I don't want my children to blame mom or think less of her. I think that has to do with what you tell them and how you handle this. You know,
mhm.
you are two adults who are equally making, it doesn't matter whether you decide to leave or they, you don't tell kids that. You say, we have come together and we have both decided, you know, you don't put it on mom or dad. You know, there's no reason. So my question is, why would they think it was mom's fault? Why would they think it was anybody's fault unless you give them hints, you know, but that part of the question I kind of struggle with because the kids shouldn't think it was this person or that person. It's the relationship that didn't work out. So, Tammy, thank you so much for the time you spend. Appreciate that.
Likewise, great to have you back here tonight. It was awesome. I will see you tomorrow, but we'll hopefully see you guys and lots of things, the drop-in groups, webinars on sex and relationship healing, work groups. We mentioned out of the doghouse with the sex addiction 101, porn addiction 101, all of them are starting up again. So check those out. Email me if you have any questions. So bye, everybody. Thank you
And we
all.
haven't told them yet that we're starting a Betrayed Partners educational program, and I'm still working on the language and getting that together, but we will be, because the partners need to education too on how to handle all this and what it means.
By April,
So
we've got a plan. We're working on it. So
we have a plan.
more will be
All right.
revealed. So okay,
See
bye
you
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.